Corner. So, I'm Eli,
I'm Tessie.
and we are here to discuss The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is so exciting, and I love it, and it's one of my all-time favorites. Tessie has it down there in the lovely oceany platform here, and like genre-wise, I think it's pretty much straight up fantasy for this one, adult fantasy. What would you say?
I think so. I think it also hovers on that line between YA and adult fiction. I think it was meant for that. Uh, so
It
YA,
does.
fantasy, adult fantasy.
It's right on the border. I feel like TJ Klune walks that line a lot. So I had never heard of him before this book, right? Ever.
I
But if
haven't
you go
either.
into Hoopla and you search TJ Klune, you will find his like werewolf romance series, which is, kind
Fun.
of teen wolf, but for adults. So it's already sort of walking that line. And I'm not nearly as into werewolves as I am into X-Men and that whole concept. So I admit I did not read those, but they have good reviews. So the House in the Cerulean Sea is my comfort book, or one of them. Goblin Emperor was the other, and we talked about that last year. So, like, we are celebrating another year with another comfort book. I love it so
hmm
much. It makes me happy inside. So,
No, and we definitely need comfort books nowadays. Um,
what? No, we don't need comfort book. Why would we? Everything
Comfort
is fine
books.
all the time, 100% hunky dory.
hmm and I really loved, and before we get to the summary, but it is definitely a comfort book. I love that every single review that I read of this book said it was a comfort book, and so I immediately was like, oh, you were all right, and I love it.
Okay. Yes, it's so soft and so comforting, and nothing really bad happens. I feel like I should preface with this, like if you want a book where nothing terribly bad happens, I think the worst thing is told as a flashback, right? It's like this happened to me when I was a child. The second worst thing that happens is a kiddo is spooked and turns into a dog or has a nightmare. Like this is the scale of the badness. So the fact that it's the Antichrist having a nightmare does complicate things like this much, but like other than that, it's fine.
hmm
Um, I guess I'd summarize Cerulean Sea as if you've seen the X-Men, right? You have this school for kids who are mutants, and they all kind of feel like outcast by society, and they are welcomed by this dude named Charles Xavier, who is just like this friendly dude who wants to sort of make them feel welcome and at home. And then there's all sorts of people who want to regulate mutants and stop them from being who they are, kind of thing. Um, and that sort of has echoes in this book. In this book, children with superpowers are put into group homes as children, and this man who works as a social worker to regulate these homes is sent to a rather unusual location, an island with special cases children, run by a man named Arthur Parnassus. Does that sound
Yeah,
fair?
yeah, that sounds completely like a very good general summary of the book. Obviously, the book is a lot more than that because it delves into it. But that's I don't know how spoilery we want to get.
We can get a little
um,
spoilery. We'll do
a
the
little
spoiler wavy
spoilery.
hands. We'll do the spoiler wavy hands because it is a romance. It is a romance. It will
Yes,
warm your heart.
that
It will make
that
you
was
believe in true love again. It was so cute. It was
it
so cute.
was.
Nothing
And
else.
this book is also LGBTQ themed, which I loved about it. And the romance is between the main character, Linus Baker. I keep saying Barker in my mind, but it's Baker. And then Arthur, uh, I want to say headmaster. It's not a headmaster, but he's just
The master of the orphanage, kind of. I
yeah,
forget what they call him. They have like
I
a
forgot to
specific name
too.
for him. I think the reason I forget it is because like Linus instantly forgets it. Linus
hmm
meets him and is like, "This beautiful man. I must resist so I can be a good social worker." And it's like,
hmm
no, Linus, no, you're in the wrong genre. You don't know what's happening here right now. But
Yes.
Linus is so precious. So Linus is it's nice to have an older protagonist for one. This kind
Yes.
of reminded me of the Bachman books. My grandmother told me to tell you she's sorry, a man called Ove, that kind of thing, with sort of the older protagonists who are hitting their stride a little later in life instead of like you'll get a lot of adult literature even about people in their 20s who are just starting out on life, or you'll get people who are like rebooting their lives. And what we have right here in our dear beloved Linus is a poor cubicle drone. I love him so much. He is a poor cubicle drone whose neighbor roasts him about not having a boyfriend.
Yes, that was a delightful part.
That was. It
Yeah.
does look like Master of the Orphanage is the term we were searching for
Master?
before.
Okay.
Master of the Orphanage, which is just weird. So no wonder we were both like, I don't like this word.
Yeah. And I feel like they're associating Master of the Orphanage with some of the other cases of like the group homes where they were badly run, and they'd be like, oh, the master of that particular orphanage was horrible, and so that place had to get shut down.
That one,
Um,
yeah.
mhm. So one thing that I really liked about this book is Linus, even though he's kind of like a working for this kind of Big Brother registration organization, like his goals are really pure. Like he's doing this job because he's like, well, I'm here to do this job and I'm doing it by the book to make sure these kids are safe. And that is why he's doing it. And so there might be some like background motivations for like the people in what is it, extremely upper management,
Right.
and some politics with that, but for him himself, and then it kind of blossoms later in the book to kind of touch everybody's life. It's like he's doing this work to make sure that everybody's safe and everybody's happy. So that was kind of
Yes, it
nice.
was so good. Linus genuinely believes in what he's doing. So he's
Yeah.
chosen to go and check on Arthur Parnassus in the first place because everyone's like, ah, yes, this boring 40-year-old man who has memorized the book backwards and forwards, the rule book. He will be a stickler for rules with no compassion at all. And they got it backwards because Linus's whole thing is he memorized the rule book in the first place because he cares so much about the kids that he's just like over there fumbling at paperwork to make sure that they got it right. He just comes off as really stiff when he's in
Hmm.
person. And so then he goes to the island with his little cat, his precious little cat who I love so much. It's just him and his cat on a train. And he's like, I get to go to the beach because he's never been on the beach once in his 40 years of life. This is his little calendar on his desk for like something to make him feel better. And I'm like, oh, Linus. And then he finds out that he's going to an island where one of the many children he will be working with is the Antichrist. And he passes out.
Yeah, he's very scared.
He's very scared. Who was your favorite of the kids?
Um, I want to say, and it was really interesting with the kids because each of them had like their own superpower. They're all a little bit different in their own way. Like we have Lucy, short for Lucifer, who's the Antichrist. Um, but and then a couple others, and I want to say my favorite was Chauncey, and hopefully I'm saying their name right.
Mm-hmm.
They
The
were a
bellhop. The bellhop.
yeah, the bellhop. They, I think he was thinking about it during the book.
Yeah,
Um,
Chauncey hadn't decided yet, I don't
yeah,
think.
undecided. But
Our
and
precious gooblob of love.
yeah, nobody knew where he came from or yeah, it was like I think one description said jellyfish, another said like blah. I found their story very heartbreaking because they came to the orphanage and they were taught like, oh, you're a monster and things that monsters do is you hide under people's bed and you scare them. But all they wanted to do was become a bellhop and then so I thought their character was really sweet and every once in a while when uh, they would be hiding under the bed just because it was like, oh, kind of going back to like, oh, this was how I was raised as a jellyfish monster under the bed. This is what I should do. But then later, I guess at the very beginning of the book, even before Linus gets there, um, Chauncey's like, I want to be a bellhop. And then it's nice to see the progression of that child's story. So this is my
It was
favorite.
so sweet. I loved Chauncey so much. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness. I feel like
Who's
my
your
favorite,
favorite?
I feel like everyone's favorite is Lucy, like a little bit, because
Mm,
Lucy is just so great in every way. I really liked Sal.
yes.
So Sal's one of the older kids. He's a little more skeptical. He's been in a lot of homes. And of course Arthur's isn't like the others, but that's part of why he's so upset and withdrawn when Linus shows up in the first place, because he's been in a lot of homes where he was treated very badly. And then all of a sudden there's this home where he's safe and where he's happy, and then this man shows up with a giant rule book in judgmental eyes, and Sal's like, nope, hate this. But he's a shapeshifter and he turns into he's like a were-dog. He turns into like a little dog. Little Biddle. And he's so cute and precious and has such big dreams that he has to sort of allow himself to have eventually, yeah? So I
Hmm.
think he was one of my favorites.
No, I think the kids brought this story to life.
Mm-hmm.
They were one of my favorite parts of this
They
particular book.
they really, really did. They were so good.
Hmm.
Um, because you have the garden gnome, Talia, right? She's
Hmm.
wonderful. Loved her. She's so grumpy. She's so
Yep.
grumpy. So the minute Lina shows up on the island, right? Isn't she the one who threatens to bury him in the garden to feed her roses? And he's like, I need to go home immediately right now. So there's her, and then let's see. So many
There's
other good
Fee,
ones. Fee.
the forest sprite.
I felt like I bonded the least with Fee, but I liked that she was there.
Hmm.
Um, I loved our little friend under the bed, right?
Hmm.
Our little dragon friend under the bed, Theodore, right? Do I have that right?
Let me look it up.
I'm like, I
I was
have
like, I
his,
had the
I
book.
have his name bookmarked for Theodore. I think it's Theodore, but like,
Hmm.
I'm going to be so mad if I got it wrong. Let's see. So let me hop ahead in the chapter
Yeah,
so I'm in a
Theodore.
good place. Theodore, yes. So Theodore has a little hoard under the couch.
Hmm.
Um, and despite the fact that Linus has been threatened with live burial and all of his worst nightmares in the form of the Antichrist since landing on this island, it's actually kind of sweet because he does give Theodore the penny, or the button rather, to take under the bed with him. The button to take under the bed. He does tip Chauncey for being a bellhop. He does do all of the things for the kids. Like he does support them. Even
Hmm.
though he doesn't understand what's going on at all, he's still like, well, absolutely, I will tip you, you wonderful bellhop child. I'm so confused and terrified right now. So I liked it.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's Arthur.
Yes, Arthur. We
Arthur.
haven't really talked about. I feel like in the first half of the book, you don't really kind of see much of Arthur. You don't get to know him very well. And then the second half, you're like, oh, Arthur, everything. And I think that was kind of deliberate. He's a mysterious character at the beginning to keep a bit of mystery in the book.
Definitely. I think that's also a factor, right? Is that Linus doesn't trust Arthur for a very long time.
Hmm.
So for a lot of the narration, right? Arthur's just I mean, Linus is mentally referring to Arthur as Mr. Parnassus, like flat
Mm.
out refuses to call him by anything other than his last name and insists that he's also going to be called Mr. Baker, right? There's like that wall. It's like, okay, okay, I get it. We don't want to fraternize with the no cheating here, no getting bribed by handsome men to ignore what terrible things they're doing to the children. But then he figures it out, right? That Arthur's actually a good one. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I thought it was very clever. They have the reports included in the book that he writes to
Yes.
the agency. So you see how much he's disclosing and how much he isn't. And at first, he discloses almost everything. Like he trusts the organization, Daipomi. He trusts them a lot. Um, and then as time goes on, he trusts them a little too much, and it bleeds through a little bit just how biased Linus might be becoming.
Yeah. But I think that was a really nice progression. I feel like kind of that world building with dichotomy and like the magical creatures and like the registration system and the discrimination. It was just like it added a lot of kind of background. I don't want to say flavor, but that's the word that's coming to me for this book, because it was a very comforting book, and you have this kind of surface layer with Linus, and he's like making sure the kids are all right, and then in the background you have like this big bad organization. So I feel like that particular plot line went really well throughout the book too.
It added a good degree of tension because it would have been
Yeah,
very
there you
easy
go.
to make
That's a
this
much
book
better word.
like entirely just cozy, right? It would have made it
Yeah.
so easy to be like, hello, and we are on a beach with like these two lovely people who are falling in love with each other and these adorable children who are doing their best. And so they do a good job of having nothing bad happen, but having that threat by having the organization in the background and being like, all right. So they're trying to think if they should close this orphanage down.
Hmm.
Sorry, this orphanage down. And that's the last thing you want to happen once you start figuring out what the other orphanages are like and what this one is.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think this book in general, even though it's kind of like a kind and comforting book, and it's full of hope, but it also has the messages that it wants to convey, and I think it did it really well.
It did. It really did.
Hmm. Did you have a favorite part of the book?
Oh no. Oh
You're like
no.
too many
I
parts.
like too many parts. Okay, but I had a part bookmarked, right? I had a quote
Hmm.
bookmarked. But quotes I feel like aren't parts. Let me see. I think my favorite part would be the ice cream shop.
Mm.
There's a part where Linus agrees to take the children into town along with Arthur. And it's because he and Arthur have finally reached that level of trust where it's like, yeah, neither of us is going to hurt these kids. And like he cares about the kids and they all really want to go to town. So you have this trip where they go to like a music store. Linus takes Lucy to a music store because he loves it. And then you have the trip to the ice cream parlor. And I liked the ice cream parlor best because then you find out kind of some of Arthur's backstory as well. You see a little bit of the tensions in the town because the nearby towns, some of them are fine with mutant kids and some of them are not fine with mutant kids. And then you get to see a little bit of how that affects the children themselves. So that was my
Yeah.
favorite, was the ice cream shop specifically. How about you?
Hmm. Um, Obviously, I had a lot of parts that I liked. I stuck sticky notes all over this book. Um, but I think one of them that really kind of stood out to me, and it was kind of a climax moment. So I don't know how much I want to spoil for you guys, but
Spoilers
I'm gonna,
warning.
yeah, spoiler warning. But there is also a sprite, Earth sprite.
Yes,
I'm
there
saying that
is.
word. Zoe, who
Mm-hmm.
lives there, and she's also kind of helping to take care of the kids. And at one point, there is a tension moment where there's a potential mob from the village that is coming to the orphanage, and everybody's kind of like, "Oh no, we should
Yes.
deal with this." And then Zoe creates a saltwater road for the car to go from the island back to the mainland to the village to kind of see what's going on with this mob, how to deal with it. But I thought it was some really nice imagery and also a good tension moment. And it was also nice that even though there was a mob, they were pretty useless. So you're reading this and you're like, well, you guys are pretty useless anyway, so I don't have to be scared.
Right, they really are. It's much more of a moment to see sort of how much Linus has changed and
Hmm.
who Arthur really is as compared
Yeah.
to who Linus first thought he was, kind of thing. It's one of those moments, and it was so
Hmm.
good. And I just picture
It
it
was.
sometimes, and I'm just like, oh. So, a whole
Hmm.
thing.
Yep.
Um, I really liked some of the conversations between Linus and Arthur too. I'm skimming through my
Hmm.
favorite quote, and some of them are very silly things, like "Garden tools monthly." Oh, my dear child. Mm-mm. One of the people being very scandalized that the poor garden gnome is reading the wrong garden magazine.
I remember that.
But but I liked the emphasis that Arthur places, especially since the book starts out with Linus believing that he's boring and that he's nothing interesting and not important. Um, and so I think I bookmarked the first spot where Arthur just says, "I rather like you just the way you are." And then he has to repeat it, right? Because it doesn't sink in the first time. And he's like, "I meant what I said about liking you just the way you are. I meant it." And Linus is like, "No, can't mean it. Doesn't mean it to me. Doesn't apply to me. I'm boring." So it's so sweet. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. I think I was talking about this book to somebody else, and I was like, this is a, like, if I had to use like one word to describe it, I'd say this is a therapy book, which is like everybody in the
Yes.
book is giving each other therapy, and in the process, it gives you therapy, and you feel like you come out of it a little bit better. So,
You do. That's such a good description. It is a therapy book. Like Arthur has some ways that he still needs to be accepted, and
hmm.
Linus has ways that he needs to be accepted because Arthur is feels like an outcast on this island full of outcast children. Linus feels like he's the most boring man in Boringville. And then you have the kids, right? You've got little Lucifer Lucy, who's had people fearing him as the Antichrist his whole life, which kind of messes with you. Um, you've got Thalia, the gnome, who's so prickly just because like everyone treats her bad. Why isn't she gonna like push back a little bit against that? And you've got the
Hmm.
whole spectrum there of all these different kids and how they sort of blossom kind of thing under
Yeah.
this. And it's so sweet. Okay, sorry. I
Hmm.
made of melted ice cream, basically, regarding this
Okay.
book. It's so
I
good.
love it.
Here.
And it was also nice to read a book about, like, even though um, the kids had, like, there was problems in the books that affected them, but I really liked that when I was reading it, they were just all happy almost all of the time. So sometimes you'll read these books with the kids in it and there's like, oh, it's a plot point
There's
to
going to
make
be a
them
tragedy
miserable.
of some kind in the
Yeah,
book.
or something.
And
But
here
they
that
were
was
just
never the
happy.
thing.
No, it was never the thing, and it was really nice.
The ice cream shop, I think, is the ice cream shop and the music store, the two closest the kids get to being in
Hmm.
threat when people treat them badly. And even then,
They were, I mean, they weren't okay, but they were okay.
they weren't okay, but they were okay because there was instantly an adult to step in and to protect them.
Hmm.
And they were like, they got to be pulled aside and be like, are you okay? Are you safe? Instantly
Yep.
right after. And I found my favorite line. I found it. So I
Yes.
don't think it's a spoiler to share, right? So this
Hmm.
is kind of my favorite little exchange. It's Linus, right? With Lucifer, the little kid Lucy, the one he was most afraid of when he showed up. Um, so then, um, so it mentions he's trying to say that, Linus belongs here. So he's trying to say that Linus belongs there with them because little Lucy has just figured out, right, that the fact that Linus is a social worker means that someday he's going to have to go back and make the report. So Lucy says, "You're one of us. We're just like you." And Linus replies, "I'm afraid I don't have magic." And Lucy says, "You do, Mr. Baker. Arthur told me that there can be magic in the ordinary." And I'm like, "Aw, it's so sweet."
I remember that. Lucy was actually a very sweet kid. I was like,
Lucy
this little
was.
antichrist.
He was precious and so perceptive. He was such a perceptive little kid.
Hmm.
Very good at seeing how people needed to be taken care of as well.
Yep.
Once he figured out, that was another good thing, is it did a good job of leaning into the fact that a lot of what these kids viewed as negatives could be strengths.
Hmm.
So, did you have a favorite quote maybe? I see all your post-its or
I do, and they were mostly just favorite bits and pieces. I don't think I had a favorite quote. There's a lot of good that I got out of it, but I didn't particularly mark any of it.
that's fine.
Um, I do remember the line about that you just had in that one. I think I also kind of like, oh, this was a good one. And then, um, but in general, I want to say kind of the voices coming out of this book were all really, really good.
They were so good. I have a lot of lines bookmarked specifically from conversations between Arthur and Linus, which
Yes.
means they are sappy and ridiculous, which
Hmm.
means you, dear viewers, are going to have to read the book to get a hold of them, or most
Yes.
of them, because I don't want to spoil them. Um, but then you've got the classic, of course, so just one of them for a teaser. So Linus is having and Arthur are having a conversation, and so Linus is like, I was trying to hide my thoughts on this matter, and Arthur says, "You're much more expressive than you think. It's one of the things I, no matter, that's neither here nor there, for the moment at least." And I'm like, "Really, dude? It's right. Come on, it's right there.
It's right there.
A little farther." And it
Hmm.
doesn't. And it's like, the book does a very great job of playing with those kind of classic romance tropes without you ever feeling like it's a check by numbers or anything. You're still sitting there like, they have to tell each other and they didn't, kind of thing.
Hmm. Although one trope that they did throw in, which I thought was nice, is I feel like when they first started really liking each other, like that first real like instance where I looked at it and I was like, ah, yes, that's gonna be a nice romance, is when they were sitting and they were talking about books, which I'm like, oh,
Yes!
librarian.
I
I'm like,
know.
I knew that instant. I was like, oh, you guys have a lot in common and can actually discuss it.
hmm It's
So,
definitely one of those truth and television things kind of thing for me, right? Where I'm just like, I realize that I'm being pandered to right now and I don't care because you're correct. Sitting down and talking about books, that is a moment. That is a genuine moment. It's important. So
mhm.
we say as we talk about books. Everyone talk about books with your friends. Very important.
Right. And I feel like it would do a disservice to this book because I know we always talk about, oh, what was the parts we didn't like about the book? But this is generally such a nice book that I don't want to say anything bad about it.
That's kind of where I'm at, right? Like everything
Yeah.
I've got is it's so small.
Hmm.
It's sort of like, oh, I wish this sundae had sprinkles. Well,
Hmm.
okay, but I'm not going to come up to you and be like, this sundae was perfect except for the sprinkles. Sprinkles, 3 stars on Yelp. No, it's still a 5 star on Yelp book for me. Like I'm not
Yeah.
going to complain one way or another about the lack of sprinkles.
Hmm.
Um, I guess the one thing that I do wish that I can say that isn't a criticism at all, but just shows how attached I am to the world, is I wish this had been a series.
Mm,
A little bit. It works very well as a standalone book, but I think at the end of this book, the thing I wanted most was to spend more time in this world and to spend more
hmm.
time.
Yeah, I could agree with that. It was a very nice book, and it could have been nice to have like multiple versions. Maybe it'll be have like a spin-off with one of the kids when they're an adult, and I can see how amazing they turn out to be.
I
Um,
know, I know. TJ Klune at this time has said he has no plans for a sequel for this one. This one's a standalone, which
that's
means
good.
eventually I'm going to just have to imagine to myself what kind of person. I'll have to imagine a grown-up Lucy dancing to Elvis records in the
There we go.
store kind of thing, all of that. So, could be worse.
Hmm.
He's still so sweet either way. Um, but next week, next Tuesday, in fact, TJ Klune comes out with a second book for adults, right? And we're looking forward to that one. That one is not connected. So I believe, what is that next one? I wrote it down in my notes.
The Whisper Under the Door, is it that one?
It is, in fact, Under the
Okay.
Whispering Door. And
Okay,
so the
that was
premise
close.
of that one looks like so the cover looks exactly like Cerulean Sea. And I'm like,
Mm.
it's not a sequel, but I want it to be. But of course, it's still going to be delightful. The whole premise here, yes, is that a young man named Wallace Price is collected from his funeral, right? And then instead of going directly to death, don't pass go, don't collect $200, ends up at a tea shop in purgatory
Okay.
with a man named Hugo, right? And gets to hang out a little bit with Hugo and meet all the people who are passing through. So he has 1 week before he crosses over and can work in the tea shop for that week. So I'm like, all right, I'm here for this. 1 week before you die in a tea shop with a handsome tea shop owner. Absolutely. Tell me more. What happened to you, Wallace Price? So I'm here for it.
It sounds a little bit like with that same kind of line with the house on the Cerulean Sea, where you have this like premise that is like potentially with some dark themes, but then it turned out to be a really nice, comforting, hopeful book. So might be
Yes.
along that same kind of vein.
I'm hoping it's that level of coziness, right?
Yeah.
So far, there's not really any reviews to work with. The
Hmm.
ones that exist seem to suggest that it is that same level, right? It's like not, I think a lot of people have referred to it as making them cry because it's so soft. And that's kind
Mm.
of where this one was like, yes, little heart like melted butter, made me all soft at the end, kind of thing. If you're going to cry, it's because it's sweet.
Oh.
So, who would we
Well,
recommend this to if we were going to recommend it to anybody?
I guess if you feel like you want a book right now to read that is not heavy, that makes you feel hopeful, that makes you feel like there's like, oh, there's some good in the world. People are out there trying their best, to make things better. And also, if you want a side of LGBTQ romance, which I'm always up for, this is
Always.
the book to read. So it was a very just nice book like you can throw in between like I don't know some of your serious books.
Yeah, it fits very well for that. I think
Mhm.
I'd recommend it. Let's see. If you were wanting to go away to the beach right now, then sure, this
Mm.
is a good one. For that, let's see. I think I'd recommend it to people who feel a little squished, right? Like if you feel kind of like you're squished or you're sad or you're just kind of deflated. I feel like this is a good book to just be like, all right, I'm going to curl up under blankets for the next 8 hours and I'm going to read this book with hot chocolate and like with a stuffed animal, and then I'm going to cry a little bit when these people tell each other that they're fine just the way they are without any changes, because maybe that's something I've been wanting to hear. So I'd recommend it to those people, and I'd also recommend it to fans of X-Men because
Fun.
I feel like, yeah, X-Men is much more actiony, right? But the thing
Mhm.
that always drew me to X-Men is the idea of all of these misfits kind of finding a found family with each other. And this one
Mhm.
is definitely playing into the recent trend in books of bringing forward that found family. So I'd recommend it for that.
Mhm. Totally agree. All
Thank you for
right.
reading this book with me, Tessa. This
Yeah.
was so great.
No, thank you. I really enjoyed this book, and I hope all of you guys enjoy this book too. We definitely recommend it. And then I guess if you like this book, the author has a lot of other books coming out and a lot of books that they've already written, so you could just find a whole new author, which is always exciting.
If you have a favorite comfort read, you should definitely tell us in the comments because that would
Yep.
be cool. And we want to
I
find more
need
comfort
more.
reads. We're saps. Please, please,
Yeah.
more comfort reads for us. We need it. And yeah, that'll be great. So I guess this is the last Reader's Corner before it's officially fall and we have fall books instead of the summerish books, right? The first day of fall is what? Next week?
Maybe.
I think
It
so.
feels like fall now.
It feels like fall now, except when it was
Mhm.
100 degrees before, then it didn't.
That's true. It's like summer in the morning, fall at night. I don't know.
Something weird. But anyway, thank you all for coming and thanks for tuning in to Aurora Public Library. Bye, everyone.